So to knit, you need to again have these cast on stitches in your left hand, and what we're going to do this time is pretty much the same as the cast on. We're going to move the stitches from this needle onto this needle. So you put your right hand needle in, needle's nicely crossed, bring the yarn round, pull your stitch through, and now you need to slide that stitch off. So we'll get them a bit closer to the end and just slide it off like that. And this is your new stitch. So needle in, yarn round, pull the stitch through, and then slide it off. Try and keep it nice and loose. You don't need to keep pulling yarn all over the place, just keep it nice and relaxed. In, round, through, off. In, round, through, off. And I'll just keep going to the end so you can watch that. You can keep moving your knitting up the needle if you're having a problem. You want to try not to stretch your knitting if at all possible. So go all the way to the end of the row, including the last stitch, in, round, through and off, and that is your first row of knitting. Now you can see that the height is built up. We've got a bit more knitting than we had there before. So now we need to move these stitches over to our left hand. So you just move the needle over, and now we're going to knit our second row. So needle in, yarn round, make sure you're using the bit that's attached to the ball, stitch through and off, in, round, through, off. Keep going. And you'll soon see, especially with a nice thick yarn like this, that we've already got the beginnings of something like a scarf. Here. So I'm going to do a few more rows like that to show you what knitting every row looks like. Here we are, I've knitted several rows here, and the good thing that you can see about knitting every row is that it's exactly the same on this side as it is on this side. So you basically have little rows of bumps. If you can see these two little bumps going along here, you've got a whole row of those, and then in between the rows of bumps, if I stretch it apart, you can see little zigzag V's, and then you've got rows of bumps again, and that's because when you knit you actually create the rows of V's on the side you're knitting, but a back of a V is a bump, so you get this lovely textured knitting that sits flat, and it's really good for edges. It's lovely for a scarf, but the one thing about it is it does stretch quite a lot, and it's not quite often you don't want textured knitting. Sometimes you do, often you don't. So the next thing we need to do is learn how to purl, but for this little tutorial now you can knit, and if you want to carry on practicing you could cast on 20 stitches using a super chunky yarn like our plump. And just keep knitting. You'd need at least 2 balls for a nice fat scarf. If you wanted to do a child's scarf with these 10 stitches, you could probably just carry on going using one skein. Okay.